All right, you've gathered some really fascinating material here, digging into the recent crypto market climb. Looks like we're focusing on Bitcoin's rally, but also the broader forces involved.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is basically to cut through these sources you've provided, pull out the key insights, and give you a clear picture of what's actually driving things right now.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll hit the big macro currents, right? And the institutional money flow.
Yeah, the shifts in politics and regulation, and also the rise of stablecoins as payment tools. It's quite a mix, and your sources lay out the different pieces quite well.
Let's start with the big picture then. The macro forces and liquidity. One thing in the sources that jumped out was describing Bitcoin's rally as peaceful. What exactly does that mean here?
Well, it's interesting they use that word peaceful, especially as Bitcoin is apparently pushing towards potential new highs, maybe in that 110K, 112K range mentioned.
Right.
The sources seem to attribute this calm ascent not to some sudden wild speculation, but more to these underlying macro drivers. Things like, easing global liquidity, maybe a rise in the M2 money supply.
That's the broad money circulating.
Correct. That and a weaker U.S. dollar are mentioned as factors.
Okay, so it sounds less like a FOMO spike, fear of missing out, and more like a fundamental shift, maybe, benefiting from a bigger financial tide.
That's precisely the implication here, and the sources seem to back this up with on-chain data.
The public transaction history.
Yeah, showing strong accumulation, apparently, and
Sure.
not much profit-taking, so people holding on, which suggests, demand might be coming from more committed buyers who are riding this macro wave.
Okay, that sets the stage pretty well. So
Yeah.
riding that wave, who are the big players getting involved? Your sources had some pretty significant numbers on the institutional side.
They really do. I mean, looking at the numbers, crypto fund assets apparently hit a record $167 billion back in May. And what's really notable are the inflows into specific things. Around $5.5 billion reportedly went into Bitcoin ETFs.
$5.5 billion just into Bitcoin ETFs. That's a huge signal from traditional finance, isn't it?
It is. And there was also about $0.9 billion into Ether funds mentioned.
Does that level of interest connect back to how Bitcoin is being viewed?
Absolutely. Bitcoin's market dominance climbed to around 64%, according to this material, and it reinforces that whole digital gold narrative. The sources suggest institutions are increasingly looking at it for hedging their portfolios.
Hedging. So like using it as a buffer against risk in other assets.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
That moves it beyond just pure speculation.
Right. Now, here's where it gets really compelling for me, the political and regulatory side. Yeah. Your sources seem to paint a picture of a real shift happening, especially in the U.S.
Yeah, this is a major point in the materials. There seems to be this described turn towards a more, quote, pro-crypto stance. And they cite specific actions attributed to the Trump administration, like a strategic Bitcoin reserve executive order in March, setting up a crypto working group, and signals about maybe easing up on SEC enforcement.
And this isn't just happening quietly, is it? The sources describe it playing out publicly.
Very much so. They describe a scene at the Bitcoin 2025 event with Magier-aligned political figures apparently celebrating crypto adoption. But it's really important we highlight the nuance your sources provide here. They also report tensions popping up at that same event, clashes between maybe grassroots decentralization folks and interests seen as more aligned with the state.
Right.
So we're just laying out the picture from your sources, showing these different angles without taking a side. It definitely shows the complexity as crypto kind of enters the political mainstream.
Understood. Okay, moving from the political stage.
Yeah.
Let's touch on something more practical that seems to be gaining ground, according to your sources, stablecoins.
Yes, stablecoins seem to be picking up steam as actual payment tools, moving beyond just, crypto trading. Oh, interesting.
Your sources give concrete examples,
Yeah.
apparently being used by firms like Uber and Visa, and even getting traction on platforms for small businesses.
So this isn't just theory. It's actual, everyday use cases starting to emerge.
Exactly. And that practical adoption is what makes their growth quite significant. But naturally, as they get bigger,
They draw attention.
right, they draw regulatory attention. Specifically around transparency and financial risk, the source material highlights those as key concerns regulators are focusing on.
Okay, right. Let's try and pull these different threads together then. Based on everything you've gathered in these sources, this recent crypto surge seems fueled by a mix of things.
It does. We've got the easing macro conditions that surge in institutional investment, treating Bitcoin as a potential hedge.
That noticeable shift in political and regulatory attitudes towards, maybe, acceptance.
And the quiet but growing real-world use of stablecoins for payments. So these pieces together, they paint a picture of a market that's changing fast. It's engaging with global finance, political systems, and now increasingly everyday transactions.
Yeah, it's a confluence of factors.
So here's a final thought, based purely on what your sources describe. With this blend of serious institutional money, direct political interest, and stablecoins finding actual payment uses, what might this changing landscape imply for the fundamental nature of crypto itself going forward? Something to perhaps mull over as you digest this deep dive.